The following Saturday, August was working at Lias Apothecary, organizing herbs, hanging crystals in the window, and dusting the Celtic, Viking, and Native American jewelry. She was sweeping the dust bunnies from the corners of the front window when something made her look up, and she saw Wolf crossing the street, coming toward the store. Her heart leapt, and she dashed to the back and crouched down behind the counter. The doorbells rang as he entered, and she held her breath. She heard his voice calling for Bridget, and a shiver ran through her body. Then she heard him come back to the counter and stop.
I know you're in here, Red.
At the sound of her name, she exhaled finally, then stood up so quickly that she went lightheaded for a moment. Hello, Mr. Neighbor.
Why are you hiding back there?
August's brain was not quite ready to respond, but her mouth was more than capable of carrying on all its own. What? Why do you think? You've made it pretty obvious that you don't enjoy my company. You don't want me around. That doesn't feel so great, you know.
I imagine not.
He seemed the sincere sort. It hurts my feelings. It came out a bit more pathetic than she would have wanted, but to her surprise, he seemed genuinely pained. He regarded her quietly for a few seconds, and she wondered with trepidation what on earth he was going to say next. She held her breath without even realizing it.
I do apologize for hurting your feelings. Please forgive me.
Well, okay. How could I not forgive you with those big, sincere eyes you have?
All the better to apologize with.
So, what can I get for you? She asked in her best shopgirl manner.
There should be a package here for me.
There are a few packages here that Bridget left for customers. What's your name? He hesitated and tried to peek around her at the bags organized on the opposite counter. August moved and swayed to block his view. Her arms crossed and head tilted. Name? It was obvious he had to offer it up or risk offending her again, along with not collecting his package. She could feel the pressure of his gaze as he looked at her, studied her, his eyes turned to the floor. August swore she could hear the old wooden clock in the back room ticking over the gentle Celtic shop music and the wind chimes swaying under the air vent. Finally, he looked up again and straight into her eyes.
Phelan Connell.
August smiled congenially, triumphantly. The wall was crumbling, at least a little. He smiled back and bowed to her, and when he rose, he held his hand out expectantly. Unsure what was to happen next, she rested the whole of her hand and wrist into his. He immediately pulled it back as if he'd been bitten.
Sorry. That wasn't very gallant, I'm afraid.
He shook the hand out.
That bracelet must be made of mistletoe. I'm severely allergic.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, she said, pulling hard at the band around her wrist. Here, I'll get rid of it. She jammed it into her pocket, then held her hand out for him again, barely containing a squeal of delight. He lifted it gently and kissed her fingers, and August felt a tingle shoot up her arm and down her spine. She set her hand down on the counter and stepped back.
Are you satisfied now, Red?
Well, I'm glad to know your name, Phelan Connell. I thought I was going to have to call you Wolf forever.
Wolf?
You know, because of your Halloween costume. The night I was accidentally spying on you. Now, notice how I put the emphasis on accidentally?
Aye.
Not that I mind calling you Wolf sometimes, as long as you don't.
I don't.
But I still wonder why you treated me like a virus. I'm just saying, maybe you could have at least told me your name.
You know it now. Can't just let it go, can you? It's not you, dear girl. You are perfectly delightful.
August smiled. Delightful. She'd take it. But she could feel there was more he was not saying, and she squinted a bit.
I can see you'll have a hard time putting this down, won't you, little Red?
His pale blue eyes sparkled. She noticed that it both tickled and annoyed her when he called her that. She nodded and waited expectantly. He stepped closer and bent toward her with a conspiratorial look. She leaned in too and felt his sweet-smelling breath on her cheek as he spoke low in her ear.
Red, it is because I am fond of you that I do not allow you to become entangled in my life. It has been difficult to keep my distance, to say the least.
A thrill rushed through her at his admission, but the contradictory message pricked at her. This man was infuriatingly mysterious and tantalizingly beautiful. She could feel him closing the door on her, and her throat tightened and her stomach began fluttering. Her bottled-up longing filled her eyes as she spoke. What harm could it do to just have a few conversations? She wanted to say so much more, but she held her tongue. His features softened, and her heart thudded hard at the glimmer of what she hoped would be his affirmation.
Conversations. Just a few.
His gently mocking tone made it clear that he knew there was a danger, that it would be much more than that, and that she knew it too. Well, if we just kind of run into each other, then it won't be a big deal, she said casually, and traced a finger on the countertop. She was certain nobody could be cooler than she was being at that moment. If I were, perhaps, reading by the stream at the edge of the woods tomorrow afternoon, she waved a hand in the air, and you happened to stroll by around 3 o'clock, that wouldn't be a big deal, would it? She paused here and gave him a brief glance, then returned to tracing nothing on the countertop. It'd just be two neighbors who chanced to meet at the end of their properties, right?
I'll take my package now. As to yards and streams and chance meetings, I imagine we'll have to see what fate has in store.
I imagine we will. She almost choked on the words. Definitely not cool. She clutched into a tiny bit of hope that he might meet her, just to talk, of course. He continued to look her in the eye, and she held his look as he tucked the small parcel under his arm and turned for the door. She waited until his hand was on the handle. My name is August, in case you forgot. He paused and then turned. He was trying hard not to grin.
August. I remember.
Then he bowed once more and slipped out of the door in one smooth step. All that evening, August thought about Phelan's wise and smiling eyes, which made it rather difficult for her to sit still through dinner.